Alright guys, welcome back to the shop. So we've got an interesting project to work on today. You might remember that about this time last year, I built a maple dresser for my nephew because he was born last year. So it's a dresser slash changing table. And so my sister called me up saying that, hey, we can't actually open the drawers on the dresser anymore. I told her that it's a pretty simple fix. All I have to do is come over, hand clean the sides of the drawers and, the top and the bottom edges. Just have to remove some material to make sure they slide a little better. But when I got there, I found out that the drawers were actually completely seized up in the dresser. You could not, I'm a pretty strong guy. I could not pull out those drawers, without pretty severe force. Enough force to fully topple over the dresser. So that's not okay. And so I know exactly what the issue is looking back at the videos, when I put those drawers together and when I fitted them up the first time, I made sure that they were a nice piston fit. They slid in really tightly, which is exactly the problem. And so overall, the temperature changes and the humidity of my sister's house is astronomically different than the garage here where I built them. Here I have the same humidity as outside because obviously the whole wall opens up and I keep it at about 15 degrees. So it's much more of a natural temperature, which is what the wood was used to. Whereas my sister's house, and especially my nephew's room because he's a baby, it's very warm and it's very humid. So I've got all the drawers in my truck there. We're just gonna bring them in, take some material off the sides, remove some material from the top and the bottom edges so that they slide in a little better, re-wax all the sides with some paraffin wax so that they slide even nicer than they did before, and then we'll be taking them back, reinstalling them, and hopefully that is all that it takes. Okay, just a quick side note. What I'm using here is a 3M Cubitron 2. It's their mesh sanding disc. This stuff is absolute garbage. It cuts beautifully, it leaves a really nice finish, but it does not stay on the stupid random orbital sander. And I've had this issue since I started using this stuff. Now, on the first sander that I tried using it on, my old DeWalt one, I realized that the pad on it, the Velcro, was just completely shot. But this Bosch sander is less than a year old, and so the Velcro on it should be just fine. And I make sure that every time I switch grits, I blow all the dust that's off the Velcro here. This stuff just will not stay attached. I cannot run this sander with this 3M Cubitron 2 mesh sandpaper without minimally the shop vac running. And even with the shop vac running, creating that suction, pulling this sandpaper in, it still has a tendency to shoot off and just go loose. So I do not recommend this. I only bought this stuff on the recommendation of Jonathan Katz Moses here on YouTube because he did this whole sandpaper test and that. Obviously in that test, he didn't do any kind of real world testing. It was just the amount of material that the sandpaper removes. So as far as the amount of the material the sandpaper removes, this stuff is great. But as far as actual functionality in the shop, when I have to spend half the time, blowing off the sander, running around the shop, chasing these discs as they're flying all over the place, that takes a lot of time away from, doing useful stuff in the shop. So definitely this 3M Cubitron 2, do not buy it. It is horrible for actually trying to use it in the shop. So I know what all of you are probably thinking right now. If wood movement is the issue, why am I spending all this time, hand planing the sides and removing material from the sides of the board? Because as we all know, wood doesn't really move much in the thickness of it. It mostly moves over the width of it. So the idea behind removing all this material from the sides is just to make sure there is no chance of it being a binding point. There was some rub marks showing on some of the drawers on the sides, so I just want to go through and just remove some material there to make sure that's not going to be a problem. Plus I sanded this up to 180 grit now, which I think is smoother than I probably did it when I did it the first time. So now they are nice and smooth. Once we get some wax on there, it'll help it slide a little bit better. But now we're gonna go through and actually deal with what I think the problem is, and that is that our drawers have expanded in height, which is where we're actually getting our binding. So the sides probably is not the thing that was binding up. It was probably the vertical here. So we're mainly going to remove material from the top because removing material from the bottom just generally isn't a good idea, because the bottom of your drawer is already a fairly weak point of the whole drawer construction. So we want to remove it from the top if we can. So we're just going to use the hand plane as much as possible here, and then we'll finish off with some sanding. Hopefully there won't be too much of it, because the hand plane should be able to do a pretty good job on the edges here. But because this is maple, there probably will be some sanding involved afterwards. Okay, so the drawers I think are all going to fit now. I took a decent amount of material off both the sides and the tops here. So if they don't fit now, we've got a much more serious problem than I even anticipated. So I'm going to take these back to my sister's house, put them in. You can see that there's not any finish on them right now, the areas I just cleared off. I didn't want to put any finish on them in case I do have to remove more material. It's a lot easier to cut off that material either with the hand plane or the random orbital sander if I don't have to deal with getting through that oil and that wax I'm going to be applying to here. Alright guys, so I'm back from dropping off those drawers. They all fit up beautifully. I left them unfinished just because I was afraid that the smell from the finish that I was going to use would just be a little bit overpowering. I want to make sure that my nephew is still able to sleep at night, even my sister doesn't have to air out her whole house, just because I put some finish on some wood drawers. So I just left the finish with my sister. I told her on a nice day to wipe it on, leave the drawers outside, and let it dry out, let it air out for a little while before you put it back inside, because it's going to have a little bit of a smell to it. So that's all done and dusted. The drawers fit absolutely beautifully. I managed to, just in the shop here, randomly guessing on about how much material I actually need to take off. I got it absolutely perfect. Again, the important lesson here is with that style of dresser. So if you're doing a solid wood drawer construction, so no drawer size or anything like that, and fitting them into a space, what you want to do is make sure that they're very undersized. Now, I already explained this to my sister, but I probably wouldn't build that dresser the same way that I did now, because now I actually have more experience working with drawer slides than that, and I think that drawer slides in a lot of ways are superior, especially because my nephew is going to grow up using this dresser. Those drawers are pretty heavy. Even me as a grown man, those drawers are pretty heavy to pull out. And when they're all loaded down with clothing, they're still kind of heavy. So that's where drawer slides really do come in handy. Because you're using mechanical advantage, you got all those ball bearings, it does make it easier to pull the drawers in and out. So I told my sister that if these drawers don't work out, if something goes wrong with them, if they jam up again, then we'll just remake them. Because I have that dovetail jig, it'd be really easy, in an afternoon to just batch out, 5 drawers, so that's really nothing that intimidating. And I made sure that when I was building that dresser that I set up all the side rails and that to be able to someday mount in drawer slides. And at some point in time with that dresser, I have to find a way to create some kind of a stop, because right now, if you pull the drawers, they will just come right out. There's nothing stopping them. And this is how I've done, I did this on my desk, I did this with the pie cupboard, pretty much everything I've done. I haven't thought about putting a stop at the back of the drawer just because I'm an adult and, I don't ever really think of just reefing on a drawer. If I'm opening a drawer, I kind of open it slowly, pull out what I need, and do what I do. But as my sister mentioned, as she's kind of found, having a kid, sometimes you yank in a drawer open to get the clothes and that, to get the diapers and all that kind of stuff. What they're gonna do is, I need a t-shirt, yank the drawer open. You don't want them to be able to do that, because again, like I said, these drawers are very heavy. So I've got some pictures of the dresser, I've got all that kind of stuff. Obviously I still have all the high detail video from when I actually built the thing, which is really handy. So I'm going to go through and see if I can find a way to add in some drawer stops. That is a little bit fancier. And so we're not going to be doing anything on the bed frame today. I'm going to make sure that that epoxy still has, just as much time as it can have to cure. I checked the knot. It's still squishy, so I think we might ruin that board with that 24-hour epoxy just pouring a little bit too deep. The main rail, it's getting there. It's almost cured up. I think once we get, we'll just leave it as long as we possibly can. But I did go and pick up the hardware today for the beds, the bolts that we're going to be using. So I made sure to pick up extra because that's always important to do. And so I bought these at Lowe's, and the only reason I chose Lowe's of all the other hardware options in Calgary is because they had a square nut. So you could buy a nut that fit a 1/2 inch by 13 thread that was square. That was the idea. When I got there, they only had 3 in the drawer. I asked the guy if they had any more. He said, so I kind of took that as he wasn't going to look for it, or no, what they have in the drawer is what they have. So obviously for the bed, I need a minimum of 4, so that was not an option. So I just got some normal nuts, and I think that these will work just fine. They're not going to be as ideal. Again, the benefit of a square nut is that you would have a lot more holding power when you're turning it. So with this, we'll just have to make it work. But you can see there, that is going to be a pretty solid connection. So we're going to have this side inset into the leg a little bit, and then this whole section is going to reach pretty deep into that side rail to help hold everything together. Because we want to make sure that when we're pulling everything together here, that it's going to be as strong as possible. So having this nut pull against that end grain on that side rail, this should be a very, very solid connection. So I think that's going to work out just beautifully. And so if I find that this doesn't work out nicely, all I have to do is just go online and order the square nuts from Lowe's. But I think that just a normal hex nut will work, but again, it's one of those things. We'll find out. Now, one of the things that I will say is these are not the ones that I wanted to use. What I wanted to use was Horton Brass's bed bolts. They're just really beautiful. You know, they're basically the same idea. It's just a bolt with a square nut that goes into your side rails, pulls everything together. It's the exact same thing. But they're so much nicer. They're nice black hardware, they're a lot cleaner, and they have a square head rather than a hex head. So you can't use a normal socket on it, but what you can do is from Horton Brasses, you can buy just a square socket key that you then just give to your customer, and overall it just seems like a much nicer system. But when I priced it all out, you know, with shipping and all that, it pushed it too far. You know, I didn't want to have $100 hardware charge on there when I could do the exact same thing for, I don't know, this whole bag was like 38 bucks, and this is enough for making 2 beds. So that's one of those downsides. Again, purely because I live in Canada, I think it was mainly the shipping that made those bolts way too expensive to get here. So that's one of the downsides. But anyway, if you're building a bed frame and you're in the US, definitely check out the Horton Brasses bed bolts. I think that's what they're called, because they really are a nice option. So that's gonna do it for this video, guys. I apologize again that we're not really doing any project or woodworking related stuff. I've been promising my sister that I was gonna go and fix that dresser for a couple of weeks now, and I just set the time aside today, make sure that I wanted to do it. I did plan to record more, but again, it's one of those things I don't really want to record at my sister's house, anything like that. So it's, you know, it's just privacy sake. Just because I basically post my whole life on YouTube, it doesn't mean I want to share my family's. So that's just one of those things. So I hope you guys are happy with what I was able to show you. So tomorrow we will be back on the bed frame. We're going to get those mortises cut. It's going to be a really good time because we're actually going to get to see this thing start to come together. I'm super excited for it, and I hope you guys are too. But as always, guys, I do hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.